Welcome back to Goshen Prepping, everybody. I'm sure you've seen the news. It's all over the news about how President Trump is sending two ballistic nuclear submarines toward Russia. And there's certain things, very important things you need to know about this, by the way, but there's things that are basically just hyperbole, but then there's important stuff too we need to look at. So it's a short video, by the way. I'm going to jump right into it, but you may want to watch through this because obviously any type of nuclear exchange is something we need to prepare for. Understand, first of all, the subs going over there is just a show of force, basically letting Putin know that Trump doesn't appreciate or recognize what he's doing. He's trying to pull him to the table to do some talking. But the submarines, I want you to understand, are ballistic submarines. We call them boomers. The United States, we have about 14 of them. And they're the ones that actually have the nuclear ballistic missiles in case there is some kind of nuclear exchange. The thing is, we always have a good 8 or 10, if not more, of these submarines somewhere around the world, often very close to Russia. And they're very quiet, very stealthy submarines, whereas in the majority of the time, they don't even know they're even there. So when President Trump says, hey, look, we're sending two of these over there, he's not like, calling a bluff or dealing his hands. He's simply saying, we don't like your actions. There's already submarines over there, but we're sending two more because what you're doing right now is not recognized by, in reality, not just the United States, but the international community as far as between the war between Russia and Ukraine. Now, listen, this is not one of those times where everybody gets to spiel off and who they approve, who they disapprove, if they love Trump, they love Putin. I have my opinions. I'm sure you do too. This is a prepping channel. It's about preparedness. So let's keep your politics out of it and let's focus on the real important thing, and that's called survival. All right, so here's the thing. If Russia launches a nuclear strike, the majority of the missiles will go over our North Pole, unless they have some nuclear ballistic submarines, which they do, much fewer than what we have, and they're much louder. They're very easy for us to track, and we always have basically a fast attack submarine trailing them. So in reality, Russia's deterrent for a nuclear submarine is not the best in the world. So when we look at intercontinental ballistic missiles coming over the North Pole, it takes a while for them to reach the United States. Specifically, it takes a while to reach what's called our nuclear sponge. In the West, the Midwest area, we have our nuclear silos. We put them there on purpose in the United States, so that way if there is an attack, it'll take it away from the population centers. And that's something I want to focus on because people think, probably because of Hollywood, that if there is some kind of nuclear exchange, they're going to be targeting every single major city, trying to kill every single American. And listen, in reality, I'm not saying that's not true. That very well may be the case, but that's not going to be their first priority. Their first priority is to try to stop our missiles from being launched in the first place. So sending it over to like Montana, for example, or Wyoming, North Dakota, where our missile silos are located, that's the nuclear sponge. We have some warning. It's not a very quick trip going over there. We're talking about 20 minutes. And all I know is I hope our government does give us some warning and said there's some inbound nuclear missiles. But here's the thing. When we talk about our nuclear contingency, if they launch from those silos, it's really a backup, especially if we launch from our submarines, is to strike first and strike fast. That's why we have our subs, and the nuclear submarines are perfect for this. We always have them deployed, they're always around, and we're always going to do this. So when we announce there's two subs, don't get caught up in frantics. Oh no, we're sending two subs out. We already have subs out and already over there. Just a big publicity statement. So here's the thing. When we talk about nuclear missiles coming into the United States, we want to make sure we're prepared. And if you live in a city, especially if it's a city of one I'm going to mention in a few minutes, it's something you need to seriously think about. Because you have to understand that obviously 20-minute warning is not much warning at all, and that's even if you get the 20 minutes. But us living out in the country, it's not necessarily going to be any better either. I'm going to go ahead and dispel some rumors real quick. This whole myth of a nuclear winter, which Hollywood's very good at this, by the way, doesn't exist. This huge nuclear exchange, which I don't think we're going to lead to that anyway, but you never know. But even if there is, this nuclear exchange is not going to lead to like this mythical nuclear winter. Is there going to be places that obviously are hurting? Of course. But it's not going to be like the end of mankind. It's not the end of life on the planet. It's not going to kill off every single organism. That was actually put out by a group of, I'm going to go ahead and use my term, radicals in the 70s, trying to end any type of nuclear proliferation, trying to end the nuclear arsenal. So it's going to kill us all. It's not true. The countless independent studies say that's not the case. So where will we be hit? Are we talking about some major cities? Of course, like Washington, D.C. is a primary target. obviously. But it's not about most of the population of DC. You live in DC, you work at a Starbucks. Russia doesn't care about you working at Starbucks. They're trying to take out our chain of command, trying to take out our government, our political structure. They're not aiming for the Smithsonian. That's just going to get caught up, obviously, in collateral. So when we talk about our major nuclear targets in America, even ones we sent over to Russia too, what's it all about? They're trying to blind, deafen, and disarm us before we have a chance to do the same to them. They're trying to suppress our retaliatory forces, because obviously this is going to lead to war. But even before they launch, they're trying to stop any retaliation before it even happens. And that's the game of the nuclear exchange that we have. They're trying to paralyze our communication and support network to make it so that if they launch the missiles fast enough, it'll stop us before we launch our missiles and vice versa, which nobody wants to be the first person to press that button on the missiles because no guarantee it's going to work either way. Missiles will get through. And now we're looking at life will change on the planet as we know it if that does happen. So where are they going to hit? We look at certain places as far as absolute places in the United States where we're looking at missiles hitting besides Washington, D.C. Obviously, our intercontinental ballistic missile facilities that's going to launch our missiles are our major ones. First off, the Warren Air Force Base in Wyoming has lots of ICBMs. Malmstrom Air Force Base in Montana, same thing. Minot Air Force Base in North Dakota has ICBMs and bombers. So obviously, those are some major targets. If you live near there, or if you live in a location downwind of those by a couple hundred miles, that's something you need to seriously consider. We're looking also SAC, our Strategic Air Command, nuclear bomber and Air Force bases. Whiteman Air Force Base in Missouri has B-2 stealth bombers. B-52 are out of Barksdale, Louisiana. Dyess Air Force Base operates the B-1Bs. Ellsworth Air Force Base in South Dakota, also B-1Bs, and Anderson Air Force Base in Guam has forward deployed nuclear bombers, which, if we look at some type of theater in the Pacific with China, obviously a major target. Missile defense and early warning systems, Cavalier Space Force Station in North Dakota, Clear Space Force Station in Alaska, Beale Air Force Base in California has actually a reconnaissance aircraft like the U-2, which is still in operation. And Thule Air Force Base in Greenland has U.S. radar installations to be able to detect that early warning, not to mention has a connection with NATO. Command and Control Centers in Offutt Air Force Base in Nebraska is all part of SAC as well, the headquarters. Cheyenne Mountain Complex in Colorado, not just the Stargate, if you ever watched that show, it was fun, but NORAD, obviously, which controls a lot of the stuff. Peterson Space Force Base, also in Colorado Springs, and of course the Pentagon, which is part of DC in Virginia. Submarine bases, they want to take those out too to stop our boomers from heading out. Naval Base Kitsap in Bangor, Washington, Kings Bay in Georgia, Norfolk Naval Station, Norfolk, Virginia, and out in Pearl Harbor. And then Air Superiority Tactical Forces, Langley, obviously. They have fighter jets, Air Combat Commands. It's not just CIA. They're Nellis Air Force Base in Nevada, Eglin Air Force Base in Florida, Tyndall Air Force Base in Florida for F-22s, and then Hill Air Force Base in Utah, F-35 operations. Okay, so that's their primary targets. Again, DC's on the list too. And I want you, don't get me wrong, there are certain cities they will be targeted. And obviously for us in Goshen Prepping, maybe not obviously, we lived in the city, we loved the city. I grew up in the city, but we had to get out, not just for this purpose, for many reasons too. And if you don't have some type of contingency plan to try to get out of the city, this alone may be something you may want to consider doing for this reason. But here's some cities for you I want you to look at that are on the map, because they're not trying to target population centers, by the way, even though that is a plan, by the way, to remove some of the major military forces, because obviously this will lead to war. But there's reasons in certain cities they will be attacking. For example, obviously, like I said, in Washington, D.C., our political structure. New York City is the center of our economic and symbolic area. Wall Street, global financial and media capital, obviously. Crash our markets, everything else. San Francisco, Silicon Valley is our major tech center. L.A., not just population, but industry, some major industry, not to mention our West Coast ports there for shipment and aerospace. Chicago, Illinois, a hub of transport and economy. Houston, Texas, oil, gas, and refineries for fuel, not to mention NASA there. Seattle, Washington, tech and submarine-based proximity, especially because of Bangor. Atlanta, a transportation and military hub, one of the largest or the busiest airports in the world is in Atlanta. Denver, same thing with the airport as well, but close proximity of NORAD and Cheyenne Mountain to be able to move in and out some major people as far as political players. Then lastly, Boston and even Philadelphia. Not just dense population, but there's historic significance because trying to undermine the authority of the United States and the history of it is one of their mentions as well. So with all that, we have to mention fallout patterns. So if you're not vaporized by a nuke, which I've had many people on the channel comment, oh, I'm hoping one of those people so you don't have to deal with all this stuff. I understand. But major food and power disruptions, at least, we're talking about the grid going down, high radiation levels falling into your area, and of course, the next step is going to lead to all-out war. So any type of nuclear exchange, this is a major step up. And we've actually had, I say this loosely, the luxury since World War II, practically speaking, of having this nuclear deterrence where we're going to launch at you, Russia, and Russia's going to launch at us, so let's nobody do it. But when we do see us basically very flamboyantly saying, hey, we're sending 2 more nuclear subs out, it does cause an escalation, not to mention our nuclear clock is close to on the hour. We've all grown up with this, even going back to duck and cover. But it's something as far as preparedness we can't neglect or negate. We have to talk about this. This obviously is the worst of the worst of the worst case scenarios. And on Goshen Prepping, I take pride in putting out quality information without the emotions and the hyperbole. And that's why I'm proud of one of my major series I put out was my nuclear series. I was a nuclear specialist in the military. I clearly have a more detailed, thorough understanding of practically everything nuclear than most people, even other channels. But I find that it's interesting. A lot of people don't want to watch these videos. If you have the time, go through my nuclear series. I'm going to link it right now. Start the series. Doesn't take long. Take notes. I've actually had people who watch it are saying, oh my gosh, it's good stuff. They watch it a few times. I highly recommend that. Because if we're talking about real prepping, it's not stockpiling food, or at least just stockpiling food or solar generators. It's about surviving what might come. And when we talk about all the news as far as things happening right now in the world, nuclear-wise, that's something we seriously, seriously need to consider. So check out these videos when you get a chance. Put it on your list. Go ahead and take notes. Watch them a few times, everybody, because when it comes to nuclear, obviously, I find that most people have this cloud of what really happens and goes on. There's a lot of wives' tales, too. It is survivable. And that's how I want you to understand. We're Goshen Prepping. It's all about preparedness for survival. Go ahead and watch this video now, the nuclear series. I'm sure you'll appreciate it. And thanks for watching all my videos. I really appreciate it. And we'll see you next time.